I have regards from Microsoft, where I was 2 days ago, speaking to an audience like this, and they speak very fondly of all you folks in the room. I should tell you, there's a story I tell at beginning, I think, of chapter 2 of an interview I do with Bill Gates in 1998. And I said, Mr. Gates, I said, when you think about the future, what do you worry about? What's your nightmare? And I expected he would say Netscape, who was about to go on trial for violating the antitrust laws, which he was found guilty twice of doing. I thought he would say Oracle, Sun, Apple. He didn't say that. He thoughtfully rocked back and forth gently, and he said, I'll tell you what I worry about, Ken. He said, I worry about someone in a garage who is inventing some new technology that I've never thought about. And that's my nightmare, that's going to challenge Microsoft. Well, in 1998, we know who was in a garage. Worldwide Google headquarters written out front in hand letters. And they have become, as I again confirmed on my trip on Monday, their worst nightmare. And I decided that as Eric alluded to, that I wanted to write about a company that was really riding the top and helping create the digital wave. And that wave was crashing into a lot of traditional businesses that I had spent a fair amount of time reporting on for the New Yorker and in books. I had actually done a book in 1991 called Three Blind Mice, which is a book about how the television networks missed the technological threat that was facing them, which was cable, which had two revenue streams and which could do things that the broadcast networks couldn't do and which were dependent totally on, as you know, advertising. And they made some of the same mistakes that I found the media in this century made in ignoring and being complacent about and not treating with alarm the digital revolution that you people represent. So I came here really to try and understand, who is this company, Google? How did it come to be? What's different about its culture? What's unusual about Google? Why is it innovative? Is there a secret sauce? And I also decided that part of the narrative would be, I didn't know what the answer was, but I knew that I wanted to write a narrative that told your story, but in the context also of how you begin to change from just a search company to what you came to call yourself, which is a media company, and how gradually you started to bump into, be it book publishing or newspapers or advertising or telephone companies or television companies or Microsoft, and how most of these other industries really ignored you. In fact, I begin the book with the story of a visit that Mel Karmazin, who was then running Viacom, which was the second largest media company in the world, CBS, MTV, Simon & Schuster, et cetera. And how he came here and he met with Eric and he met with Larry and Sergey. And he thought maybe he'd do some kind of a deal, maybe he'd even acquire you guys or something like that. This is before you're public. He had no idea what kind of revenues or growth potentials you had. And so he explained his business. At one point, as Eric described to me, he tried to sell a Super Bowl ad to Google, which was going for $2 million for a 30-second spot at the time. It's now $3 million, by the way. And of course, Eric and Larry and Sergey are appalled at the idea of spending that kind of money, and you have no idea, no one's clicking, you don't know, who is watching the ad, who is buying your product, and it seemed like a very inefficient system. But they let Mel Karmazin speak, and then they described the Google business. How you actually, there wasn't waste, you could tell who was clicking, who was buying, and it was much more intelligent. And then Karmazin said, wait a second, we don't want that kind of efficiency. We want to get people all caught up in the sizzle of buying TV or ads, and that's what really matters. We don't want the advertiser to know what they're getting. And of course, Eric and the Google people were appalled by that. And Karmazin, at the end of a 3-hour visit, leaned over in his cufflinks gleaming, and he said, and you'll pardon the language. Well, actually, I can't use language. I think C-SPAN is here, so I'll be polite. He said, "You guys are messing," he didn't use the word messing, "with the magic." And of course, at the TGIF that Friday, Larry and Sergey and Eric tell the story. We had an interesting visitor this week, and you know what he said to us, and you're messing with the magic. And of course, that's what you do here. And so among the things I learned on my visit is what engineers do. And if you start from the assumption, as the three guys who run this company start from, that the old ways of doing things are often inefficient, and you could achieve greater efficiency. And if you think about the business I'm in, the printing business, totally inefficient. The idea that you're killing trees, expensive paper, expensive printing presses, and expensive distribution, versus doing it online in multimedia form, you say, well, that's a pretty inefficient system. So the engineer comes in and says, why? Why does it have to be that way? Why can't we sell ads and know who we're selling them to and who's actually buying, and charging based on clicks rather than you think they have an impression that you've made on them? And why can't you digitize all the books ever made? And why can't you have Google News and aggregate 25,000 news sources from around the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And of course, as you do that, you start bumping into traditional media companies, and they get very upset. And the truth be told, you were very late to understand as a company that you're upsetting these people. You were pushing the envelope of say, copyright. You were pushing the issue of fair use, and you wanted to get more, you wanted to be able to do a search, and a search is wonderful. I love the idea that the now 11 books I've written could be searched, and people can have access to them. Maybe a book that didn't sell so well of mine can be brought back alive because of Google. That's terrific. On the other hand, I'd like to be consulted as an author before someone puts my book online and makes it available. And at one point, I tell the story in my book of my second interview with Sergey, and he comes in the room and he says to me, Ken, let me ask you a question. He said, why don't you just publish your book for free online? Just put it out there. Many more people will read it. I said, well, that may be true that many more people will read it, Sergey, but let me ask you a question. I said, who's going to pay me to write this book? I'm now on a leave from the New Yorker to do a book. So I need to earn a living, right? And who's going to pay for my trips out here? I made many trips out here. And who's going to pay my airfare and the hotel? And who's going to edit my book? And who's going to send me on a book tour like I'm on now? And who's going to index my book? I go through that. Sergey at that point wants to change the subject, because the truth is, he was approaching it like an engineer does, or someone who doesn't know the book publishing business. But he was also approaching it, I would argue, as someone who didn't have a full appreciation of copyright, and an appreciation that you need the cooperation of people who own the content in order to share it. I want to share my content, but I also want to make sure that I can earn a living, because that's how I make my living. And so one of the reasons you got sued initially by the Publishers and the Authors Guild was exactly for this reason. That Larry had this brilliant idea, starting in 2002, to digitize all the books, and wouldn't it be great? And it would be great. And you got the permission of libraries, but you didn't spend enough time, as Google executives admitted to me in the course of reporting this book, seeking permission from the people who own the copyright, be they publishers or be they authors. Obviously, you bump into, when you buy YouTube, you bump into Viacom, which decides that, and I think they're trying to hold you up, but nevertheless they sue you for $1 billion because they're saying you can't take Jon Stewart off the air. So I saw that, and I saw basically, I think, in the course of the 2.5 years I spent, that you are brilliant engineers, but you often are narrow in your approach to the world. And copyright is one issue. I would argue you're sometimes narrow about the privacy issue. And one reason you're getting static from not just the US government, but governments particularly in Europe, is on that privacy issue. I know Eric is very sensitive to that. But the truth is that there is a belief, and I encountered this and I report this in the book, there's a belief that if you look at and spend time on Facebook, you say, how can people be concerned about privacy? People put anything on Facebook, right? So you got to become convinced that privacy is not a big issue.